So I thought today we'd talk about you a little bit and let people get to know you. You have a pretty fascinating story that you don't talk about a whole lot. And I think it's fascinating. I've never delivered a baby. I wouldn't, my closest I've ever come to delivering a baby was New Year's Eve when I was a rookie. And because it's New Year's Eve, there are no ambulances left in the city. And they dispatched me to a teenage girl in a bathroom of her apartment having a baby, giving birth. And I was freaking out. And they sent me a message on the computer saying, look, we got an engine coming, but they don't have apparatus for a child, like to breathe, a little tiny mask and all that stuff. So you guys do the best you can. As close as I came. But when I got there, the baby was already born. She'd already had a child before, and her
Oh,
mom was there. So they were pros. But it was nerve-wracking. So I can't imagine. How many babies did you catch?
around 100, little over 100.
Yeah. How was that? What was that like?
Uh, Amazing. It was every emotion you could imagine, sometimes a little nerve-wracking, but uh, the predominant emotion is just joy.
Yeah.
Yeah, for myself, for the family, just the whole experience is pretty beautiful.
Yeah.
But my introduction to it was interesting. When I was pregnant with my daughter, Amelia, I read a book called Spiritual Midwifery by Ina May Gaskins. So I had chosen an OBGYN. I wanted a female doctor. I felt like that was important. And I even, when I interviewed OBs, I wanted a female doctor who had given birth vaginally. That was also really important to
Yeah.
me. But I was given this book, Spiritual Midwifery by Ina May Gaskins. It was given to me by a friend who had become a nurse,
Hmm.
and I read that book, and it was about basically a birth commune in Tennessee in the 70s.
Oh, wow.
And it had all of these really amazing stories of babies being born on this hippie commune. So I had a hospital birth. I had a really lovely hospital birth and had this beautiful baby girl. And fast forward about, I don't know, 6 or 7 years later,
Hmm.
and a friend of mine had chosen to have a home birth and was having midwifery care.
Oh, wow.
And she asked if I wanted to attend her birth. And at the time, honestly, had some pretty harsh thoughts about it.
Was that your first experience? I didn't even know midwifery was a thing, to be honest.
Neither did I. I thought it was a thing of the past.
Yeah. I'm like, wait, like Amish people? Because I grew up near an Amish community and a Mennonite community. So I thought maybe in that world, but not in ours. It was very different.
Yeah, I thought it was a thing in the past, and I thought it had been written out of, written into history because it was just better and safer for mothers and babies to give birth in the hospital. So, I thought, gosh, if my friend is willing to risk her life and her baby's life,
It's how irresponsible.
right, that's on her. But yes, I'll attend the birth. And I mean, the day came and I went to her house and, just I was reflecting on this book that I had read and sort of fell naturally into the support role. This was her second baby, and she was just beautiful to watch her labor in her natural environment, and
Mhm.
her husband working with her and supporting with her. And sometimes she wanted to be alone, and sometimes she wanted people. And I just felt really kind of naturally competent to be with her during that time. And then I remember when her labor transitioned, it got super intense. And all of a sudden, I was like, we need the midwives here,
Yeah,
like now.
right.
And so the midwives were called, they showed up, and they set up very quickly. And I watched my friend give birth on a birthing stool.
Hmm.
And
What is that?
it just puts the mom in a it's basically a chair that you sit on, but it's a really nice anatomically correct way to give birth, and it's
Oh,
pretty gentle on the mom. So it's an upright position instead of lying on her back in lithotomy, they call it.
mm,
So that was amazing to see. I didn't know that that was really possible. And then, the midwives, the baby was born into the midwife's hand, and then went directly to the mom, and it just was so beautiful. And then I just was watching the midwives work afterwards, and then I helped them get their bags packed and take their bags out to the car. And I just was like, oh my gosh, I want to do this. This is amazing.
yeah.
It's like the clouds parted. It was kind of a rainy day. The clouds parted and the sun was shining down on them. And I was
Right.
talking to them just like, oh. And so after that point, I thought, this is what I want to do. I want to become a midwife. And so that started my journey. And I entered the midwifery community in like 2007, 2008,
Mhm.
and was there for about 7 years.
Yeah. What roles did you play in that world, I guess we'd call it?
So I was an office manager at a freestanding birth center, and then
So, sorry. So freestanding birth center, does that mean they come there
so
to have
it
the baby, or it's just like a like a firehouse or a precinct for cops where it just you stage there and then get sent out?
no, so it was a freestanding birth center. We did all of our clinic visits there, but
Uh,
we offered home birth or birth center birth.
so it's total female women's care
Yes.
type place. Cool.
Yeah. So then I became trained as a birth assistant. And then I started studying to become a direct entry midwife. And during this time as well, there was a midwifery council that was trying to get direct entry midwives licensed in the state of Idaho.
Hmm.
And the reason licensure was important was so that midwives could legally carry life saving medications
Oh, okay.
like oxygen or Pitocin.
Hmm.
um, or antibiotics. So thinking about just treating postpartum hemorrhage or group B strep,
Hmm.
um, things like that. So I worked with the Idaho Midwifery Council and the birth community to help get midwifery licensed in the state of Idaho.
Yeah, that's a legislative
Yeah,
things. So you
yeah.
went to the state capitol and lobbied.
Yes, we
So
lobbied
you're one of
as
those evil lobbyists buying senators lunches and
well. We did some pretty mad fundraising to hire
yeah.
a lobbyist.
Well, yeah, it's part of the game.
It is
But
definitely.
in all seriousness, so you went there and you followed the path of the legislation.
Yes,
So from
committee
all the way
to,
through.
yeah, all the way through. The first year that we attempted, it failed. That I was part of it. The
Mhm.
first year it failed. So the next legislative session, we were able to get it through. But it also required a lot of teamwork with the medical community. And so, we were part of the largest home birth study in the nation
Oh wow.
by the Midwives Alliance of North America. And so midwives across the nation were collecting statistics on home births. And then, we really had to work though with the health systems
Hmm.
and get their buy in order to have the legislation run uncontested by them,
What was their
basically.
resistance? What was the regular, or I don't know what you would call it, the corporate healthcare system? What was their resistance to midwifery?
The mutual ground that we had was a mutual interest in the health and safety of mothers and babies.
Mhm.
But then there's philosophical differences about what that means. And then there's also a pretty vast, um, I don't know, midwifery practice in the same way that there's a very vast medical practice. And so we had religious communities that were training up religious midwives,
Mm. Hmm.
sort of with the God's will,
Sure.
so it was just God's will. So preterm labor, God's will; postterm labor, God's will; sick baby, God's will; sick mom, God's will.
So
And
they wouldn't do any interference.
yes, and
Okay.
so you think about a state of Idaho that really um, you know, uh, takes liberty very
Mhm.
seriously, but then sometimes that can be an extreme too. And there were legislators who did not want to infringe on the rights of families to choose how their babies were born,
Sure. I
which
mean,
is,
I can agree with that.
yeah, absolutely. Then you have a medical community that's very, very invested in outcomes, and they felt like there were midwives in the communities that were endangering mothers and babies.
Sure.
And, and so it's kind of like we had to find a middle ground
Yeah.
and create or an environment. We had to create an environment where midwives, the extreme religious midwives aside,
Mhm.
we had to create an environment where midwives felt comfortable, safe, to bring their moms and babies to the hospital if they needed extra
Yeah, if
help.
there was an emergency.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if there's an emergency, if something goes wrong, it's not like the movies or something like that where this midwife or whomever just does some sort of surgery right there in the home to save the baby or whatever. There's contingencies in place. So you guys have it's very planned and orchestrated. So what would that look like? So having a baby, things go wrong.
Well, first is making sure that you have the appropriate client, and so midwives and out of hospital birth. Uh, our demographic is normal pregnancy,
Mm.
so you can risk out if you become hypertensive or diabetic or things like that. And so that's where midwives pride themselves on being experts in normal.
Mhm.
And so regular prenatal follow-up, doing all the standard of care as far as prenatal testing and things like that goes is important, and then risking mothers out if necessary, but birth emergencies happen.
Sure.
So postpartum hemorrhage is a common one. And so it's sort of like it's anticipating what's going to happen. And so, there's like the bell curve of normal birth.
Mhm.
And even though we don't expect mothers to stay within that box exactly, when you start deviating
Mm.
outside of that bell curve, you need to start anticipating what's going to happen.
Right.
And so, most often, in my experience, when we had to transfer, it would be for a prolonged labor.
Mm. Okay.
And, it's just like maybe there was a really, really long prodromal stage, and the mom didn't sleep for the first night and has been up for the second night, and we're just not making any progress. And so to eliminate the chance of a birth emergency and also to get her some other help and support that we can't
Yeah, because
offer,
she can be getting
time
into a
to
bad place, right?
yeah, time to
Just
tran
exhaustions.
time to transport. And so really what the midwifery community needed was the ability to make that transfer of care
Mm.
without the midwife or the family um, getting, harassed by where they were transferring to.
Sure.
But then, yes, I mean, we were certified in the most common birth emergencies, including neonatal resuscitation, emergency IV hydration, postpartum hemorrhage, and things like that. But I've definitely had experiences where we accessed 911
Mhm.
and we needed EMS for
Sure.
extra help, extra support.
Was that frequent or
No,
yeah, more on the low end side?
yeah, I think out of the over 300 births I attended during my time, I think I called 911 three
Oh
times,
wow.
and all good outcomes,
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
thankfully,
Mhm.
so. But then the other roles I played during that time, I mean, my midwife. So I at the end of my midwifery practice, I ended up not getting licensed. I
Mm.
chose that I did not want to become a licensed midwife, and that, just the lifestyle itself was not right for me at that time.
Yeah.
So I went an administrative route
So the
and
lifestyle being on call and all
yeah,
that stuff and
being
just
on call, being up all night. I mean,
yeah,
it is a lifestyle and it's hard. I was having health problems
sure.
and just the lifestyle itself was not conducive to me being optimally healthy. I was very sick at the time.
Yeah.
So I went the administrative route and became the administrative director of this birth center and then transitioned it from a licensed midwifery practice to a certified nurse midwifery practice.
Mm.
And we became accredited and
Oh, cool.
just
Yeah,
did.
and you took them through the accreditation process.
Hmm.
Nice.
Yes, myself and the clinical director owner.
Oh, that's cool. So let's talk about the sickness. So what was the health issues you were dealing with being a baby?
Being a baby.
Being a sissy. No, but in all reality. Um, and I say that as somebody who like I've had my health issues aren't long term. My health issues, you're gonna die. So I've had one health issue in my life. So I'm speaking from a position of privilege. So health privilege. But I think people should hear about it. Like you've gone through a lot and you've learned a lot to be able to deal with it and get to a place where you train jiu-jitsu, run marathons, train, do all this stuff like lift weights, do all the things that you do, work, you know, quite a bit. Every hour we spend is pretty much productive doing something to move us forward. So how do you do that when you have a health issue? So what was the health issue? And I mean, we'll violate HIPAA here. And what was the health issue and how'd you get around it?
So to me, it all still feels rather mysterious, but I just have complex autoimmune issues. So I haven't felt well since I was a teenager, and my I started um, seeing doctors chronically when I was 19 years old. It was for joint pain, and one day my mom looked at my face actually, and she goes, "Oh my gosh, Jill, your face is crooked." And so we went to the doctor, and I have degenerative joint disease. And so one of my TM joints is completely deteriorated, it's just gone. So I have a face with only one TM joint. I'm a little bit lopsided.
Right.
Okay. So, yeah, that started a long journey. I ended up going from Boise, Idaho to see specialists in uh, UCSD in San Diego, rheumatology there, prosthodontist there, physical therapist there. Continued seeing rheumatology here, but they never really could figure out what I had. So
Right.
I did get a diagnosis originally of juvenile rheumatoid arthritis, later rheumatoid arthritis, much later Hashimoto's autoimmune thyroiditis.
What is Hashimoto's?
It's where your immune system attacks your thyroid. And
Oh,
so my thyroid gland itself is pretty massive and has just been hammered by my own immune system. And at this point, it just barely functions.
yeah.
So I'm on a really high dose of the thyroid hormone. And so, just a result of this incredibly sluggish metabolism and whatever else is happening in there, I suffer from just chronic fatigue, a lot of joint pain, chronic migraines, mood issues, and just kind of the same complaints that everybody complains about. Um,
With
and
that kind of stuff.
yeah, with
Yeah.
that kind of
The
stuff,
same complaints everywhere.
yeah. I mean, I feel like they are just kind of the usual complaints,
Hmm.
but the fatigue is really profound. Um, my mom will tell you if she was here, I couldn't, like between the fatigue and the joint pain and swelling, I couldn't like kneel down to tie my shoes.
Mm,
And that's for somebody who's, 20, a 20 something, a 30 something,
sure.
not to be able to
Yeah,
bend down and
that's
tie your
brutal. Yeah,
shoes.
that's hard.
So it was truly that bad. And then I would just be in a constant state of migraine. So despite all of that, though, I mean, I just kept working
Mhm.
and, just working tirelessly. I was never afraid to try something new.
You're doing river trips and all kinds of stuff during this time.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
was living for all, like, image wise from the outside looking in, living a really good life. But there's a really classic picture of me where I'm, it's clearly the middle of the day
Hmm.
and I'm laying in the tent
Hmm.
on a river beach, and I'm like making this, like rock on
Hmm.
signal. But the story behind that picture, even though like I'm looking out of the tent and I'm smiling, uh, and I look like a normal person, I was just laying in that tent suffering.
Yeah.
I had the worst migraine,
Hmm.
and I had been like on the river, like moving gear up and back and cooking and,
And like on the river, for people that aren't from this area, on the river is like rapids, carrying stuff, like you got to hump stuff from point A to point B, and
it's not
you're
a
rowing.
relaxing
It's not
vacation.
relaxing. Yeah. It's not an easy day. Yeah. So,
Yeah, and I just finally reached the point where I thought my head was going to explode.
yeah.
And so there's just a lot of that suffering inside that was happening that I just really tried not to complain about. I tried to ignore and just sort of move on. And I mean, I think I experienced the same, where I really felt like the healthcare system failed me,
Hmm.
and that I was asking for help and looking for help and nobody had any help to offer me. But then there was one day, working at the clinic, where I just was like, I actually have access to any lab I want to run. I'm going to start doing this myself.
Yeah. So you started running your own labs.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So I just kind of got the lab book out and started looking at things and talked to one of the nurse midwives there. I'm pretty protective. I don't go around just like blabbing
Sure.
about my issues, but
And you don't want to be looked at as weak.
no.
No, nobody does. So a lot of people, when they're not feeling good, they're struggling with this kind of stuff, they don't want to talk about it. They don't want to share because they're like, I'm good. I can hang. Male and female. It's not just a male trait.
Yeah, I'm a very, very private person.
Yeah.
So I'm really good at getting people to talk about themselves.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I just started running these labs and then getting the lab reports back and was like, oh my gosh, I I think I have Hashimoto's.
Wow.
I need to see an endocrinologist.
Yeah. I don't know what that is or why it's taking so long. Normally doesn't do that. It has a lot to say. It thinks you're full of shit. There's no such thing as Hashimoto's.
It's a made up
It's
word.
a made up word. That's the first time she said Hashimoto's to me, I'm like, you just made that up. Like, that's not even a real word. Like, that's some bullshit. Is that what you use to get out of work?
Right.
I've got Hashimoto's today. Nobody ever bothers to look into it. Nobody at work's ever like, wait, Hashimoto's? Not here. Doesn't exist.
Sometimes it's my excuse, sometimes it's my superpower. Don't know.
Right.
So, anyway, yeah, I think,
So you ran a panel and you discovered this for yourself.
yeah, and then it's just been the most complex case, though. I mean, it's just been difficult to control,
Mhm.
and I still feel symptom. I mean, the most recently when I went to the rheumatologist, she was said, I don't think you have rheumatoid arthritis. I think you have psoriatic
Yeah.
arthritis."
Right.
And
And what
so
is that?
yeah.
Yeah. So now what?
And so then I think, like, I feel like we're all searching for an answer. We want to know the reason. And I've been on this search for why I feel the way that I do since since I was a teenager.
Mhm.
And especially since I was 19, why I have osteoarthritis in other joints. I had a joint replacement surgery a couple years ago related to osteoarthritis.
Right.
You know, so definitely I have something going on in there that's just my immune system is just attacking itself.
Yeah.
And I, you know, I feel like I've been on this quest to find an answer, but also part of that quest has just been accepting there may never be an answer,
Right.
and that I just try to be diligent every single day to feel the best as I possibly can every single day.
Yeah. I think maybe in another episode we could talk about how you use food as medicine and how you use that to heal yourself and help me too with some stuff. So I think that would be cool. Well, one of the things I always thought was interesting was you did a hike. So you did a trip around Australia with the other midwives, right? That was pretty cool. But you did a hike too, right?
I did. So while I was working at the birth center, and after I ran all of these labs and found my endocrinologist, and I went pretty deep. I even interviewed a pharmacist, like, what's the best medication to be on? And I started paleo also
Mhm.
using food. I started to feel better pretty quickly. So much so that I just couldn't believe it. I was like, suddenly the weight is just melting off of me. I'm sleeping. I haven't had a migraine in days.
Mhm.
And I started feeling better very, very quickly. And so I decided I needed to do something that I had never done and that was going to really push me to the limit. I
Mhm.
wanted to do something so hard, something that I never thought that I would be able to do.
Mhm.
And so I planned a backpacking trip. I always loved backpacking and I'd always taken short trips, short overnighters, but I wanted to do a backpacking trip and I wanted to do a super light trip.
Mhm.
And so I planned a trip in Hell's Canyon, a 32-mile out and back, which just seemed insane to me.
Right.
I did all of the food prep for that, and like I said, I wanted it to be super light.
Mhm.
Uh, so I got a pair of walking sticks because I still couldn't walk very well,
Mhm.
and I also wasn't very strong. So I got some walking sticks, which was a game changer for me. And
Nice.
so on spring break, we set out on this 32-mile out and back.
Right.
And I just like every picture of me is just, you know, I
Love it.
have the biggest smile on my face.
Right.
Be-
Eudaimonia.
be-
Eudaimonia.
I just every day I woke up and was like, I can't believe I'm doing
The
this.
joy in striving.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was so profound for me.
Right.
And I had to address some fears too. I'm afraid of heights, and part of that hike is along the canyon wall.
Oh, okay.
And I mean, it's the deepest gorge in North America, I think. I think it's deeper than the Grand Canyon.
The gorge in Idaho is deeper than the Grand Canyon.
So when you're hiking in that canyon and you're up at the top of that canyon looking down, it was terrifying. And so I definitely was grateful for the sticks, and I had some hard moments with the heights.
Sure.
And so it was very challenging for that reason. It was very challenging physically. Even though I packed super light and super light food, I packed way too much food. But yeah, I mean, just the planning for that event, getting through that event, finishing that event was just, I knew there there was nothing that could ever stop me from anything that I wanted to do ever
Yeah.
in the future. It was a really good moment for me.
Nice. Nice. So maybe we'll close out here, and then in our next episode, let's talk about that more. Let's talk about masogi, the Japanese word for attempting a task, basically attempting a task that you don't know if you can quite do, but if you do it, it's going to be epic. So, want to talk about that?
Yeah.
All right, let's do it.